views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of Paranormal Buzz Radio or its sponsors. Use of any material produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is strictly prohibited. For information on everything Paranormal Buzz Radio has to offer, visit our website, paranormalbuzzradio.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome to Phantom Science, the podcast, where we discuss how to prove it's not just all in your head. Does the paranormal exist? If it does, how does it work? And how do we gather solid indications and data? During this podcast, we will be discussing things that many people may hold near and dear to themselves. If you feel offended at any point, just take a deep breath and think about the thing that offended you. Because we will be playing the role of the recently declawed Office of Devil's Advocate. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, and thank you very much for listening.
And welcome to Phantom Science, our first ever podcast. So, what are we going to cover in our first one is... maybe what a lot of you are thinking is, now why do we need science when we're dealing with the paranormal? I mean, isn't that the whole thing about the paranormal, is it's not explained by science, or unexplainable even? And Nico, what do you think?
I agree. I mean, I think there's an opportunity for us to look at things a different way. Some people really rely on their beliefs, and they don't really have any way to prove it. I think science can kind of help that along.
Yeah, and maybe there's some people that would say, well, it's a belief, I don't have to prove it because it's a belief. My feeling is that if you are going to make what is essentially an inner truth to you, something you believe, and you're going to try and make it an outer truth, that's something that's going on in the world, it's going to get challenged in the way you can just, not defend it. You shouldn't defend a belief as long as it's a belief. But if you're saying it's true and actually happening, then you are going to have to provide some kind of data. What do you think?
Yeah. You know, what I've noticed as well is a lot of people, when confronted in that situation, they get upset. They get defensive sometimes, even angry.
They do. And once again, because they're blurring the line between an inner truth and an outer truth. So I think I think with me, my problem is, calling it a problem may be the wrong word, but when I see people that label themselves as paranormal investigators, that is definitely an external truth that they're supposed to be investigating. But then you'll watch the reality shows and that, and then all you'll get is narrative. You'll get very little data. You'll get some equipment that's pretty much built for ghost hunting go off. Or if there is a scientific principle behind it, they don't explain it in any depth whatsoever. Or am I?
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. I think it really depends on what they're trying to do. I mean, are they producing a show? Are they trying to get paid for it? Or are they doing it for themselves? You know, if they have something that they have to produce, then they do have to kind of drag it out and create a narrative versus, if they have nothing, they have to create something.
Which is a point. So if you're doing it for something where you're being paid for, like a TV show, it's up to go there and then show a whole 1 hour of freezing your nuts off in an abandoned building.
Yeah. Nobody wants to see what it really is. That's boring.
And then no action cam running around behind someone going, dude, what's that? Dude, something moved. So, I guess. But getting back to, to do serious investigation, you kind of have to pin what's going on. And I mean paranormal in general. I mean, I'm not just talking about ghosts, although that's where we're going to be pretty much because that's what we do. But I mean UFOs, Bigfoots, anything else that comes under the umbrella of paranormal. You can't just say, oh, it's true. And, eyewitness reports are, if you ask any lawyer in the country, eyewitness reports are usually pretty damn flimsy.
Yeah.
So
hearsay, right?
Yep. So, what does it take to get something solid, maybe?
That's a tough question.
Anyway, so there was a Professor Dan Hooper on a Discovery program that kind of underlined the point, at least in my mind, as to, proving that something is there. So let me play that clip for you.
Theoretical astrophysicist Dan Hooper applies the principles of science to these witness accounts.
Let me put my skepticism aside for a moment and just imagine that there's some sort of entity in a place like this or somewhere else, and it acts the way that we think ghosts normally act, or popular culture would tell us ghosts behave. So that means these things have to be able to move through solid walls. These are thick walls of stone and concrete, right? So this is something that has to be able to move through that as if it were air. We imagined that ghosts were made of the same stuff that all of the ordinary matter we're used to. If that were the case, then ghosts couldn't travel through solid objects. They would stop just like my hand stops against my other hand, or my hand stops when I press against a wall, or anything like this. Instead, we might imagine, though, that ghosts could be made of something different.
So let's pause that right there. So, if there are ghosts, do you think they're made of normal matter?
No, really. How could they be? If they can interact in our universe, if they can come and go sometimes, appear, reappear, make sounds. I guess it depends on what you believe in, right?
Well, so here's the problem is, if they're made of normal matter, so that means that they have to have electrons in their makeup. The way it works is, the reason we can't pass through solid objects, like he just said, is because those electrons repel. So the reason that when you squish your fingers together, your fingers don't just pass through each other, even though an atom's pretty much hollow, if you think about it. An atom comprises of very little. What's stopping that is the electrons repelling against each other. So if ghosts are made of normal matter, they'd be a lot easily detected. So let's see what he thinks about them being made of something else.
Instead, we might imagine, though, that ghosts could be made of something different, something that's not atoms, something more exotic. They're actually sometimes called ghost particles. That's their nickname for the very reason that I'm talking about. In fact, if I hold up my hand and wait a second, millions of neutrinos just pass through it. So you might be tempted to imagine that maybe the ghosts are made up of some particle like neutrinos, and this enables them to pass through material. But here's the kicker. If they were, they would not emit any light or electromagnetic radiation, and we're back where we started without a signal to see.
So, here's the kicker, like he said. If they don't have atoms emit light or electromagnetic, how do we detect them?
Yeah.
And how are people seeing them?
Very true. That raises a lot of questions, I think. How would they be able to appear in our world or interact at all without that?
So, really, if you want to say that ghosts are true, and they have been seen by millions of people, which you cannot discount, science itself says, well, we don't see how they could be true. We can't test for them. We have no data, no proof that they exist. Therefore, they don't exist. Basically, is what mainstream science says, through lack of evidence. I have an idea that maybe because particles can change from wave, energy can change from wave to particle form. So what if, yes, they were ghost particles like neutrinos. I'm not saying they are neutrinos. But it's taken us how long to measure a neutrino? And we had to do that in a mine under the earth, just to detect the bloody things. So what if they are some kind of particle, some kind of wave that can be then, I don't know if it's at will or under certain circumstances, can then take on mass and act like solid matter, and therefore, emit light and emit electromagnetism. I don't know.
In a way, for us to be able to see them and for them to be able to interact in our world, wouldn't that have to be what's happening?
Yeah. So, at some level, they do have to follow, the laws of physics as it is in our universe. And we can go on to, different universes, different laws of physics, and blah, 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 which we will get into, I'm sure, in other episodes. But where was I going with this? My God, I'm old and doddery. My mind's gone blank.
Who am I?
Brains! So here, this is where I was going with it. So if they do, if not all the time, but at some point take on where they can interact with our universe, then science does become important in the paranormal, don't you think?
Yeah. Because we do have tools to try and detect that in a way. I mean, not to prove that they are coming into existence and taking on matter or some type of form. But, I mean, we've personally detected sounds, had cameras that have picked things up. I mean, how could you do that without interacting in our world? I mean, how would something be able to make a sound in that way without somehow becoming a type of matter to create that sound?
That's correct.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And there are theories. A lot of people think, especially people that do a lot of the ITC, which is using things like microphones to communicate with the dead. They believe there is a strong theory out there that, spirits or ghosts or whatever we want to call them, actually interact directly with the electronics, which kind of makes sense to me a little bit. That's why I can't get my head around the ghost box. But once again, we'll do probably an episode on the spirit box thing. We're just doing a general overview at the moment. So if we're going to use science, that means using equipment and measuring and getting data, which is basically what we do when we go out in the field. We try to stay away from the narrative, although it's unavoidable, and it's just human nature. But the important part is actually collecting data, and then you're not going to get it in one sitting. And I'll be honest, I don't believe you're going to get it jumping around from place to place like they do on the shows. You have to keep going to the same place time and time again to get data that will correspond with itself, if that makes sense.
Completely agree.
Yeah. We're not scientists. We're not trained to be scientists. To put a proper scientific investigation together, I wouldn't have the first clue. I know roughly what they're looking for, but if I wrote a paper on it, it'd be thrown out in about 3 seconds, if that. So we have to put together things in our own way, and try and do the best we can, and try and find patterns.
Yeah. I mean, that is something that we can do. Go into places repeatedly and trying to get the same incident to happen over again, and we have. We've been to places where we've got the same recordings, the same sounds, the same names. And that, to me, that's a start.
And looking for a pattern. And not only looking for a pattern and saying, I feel like so-and-so is active tonight, actually recording so-and-so being active tonight is the way to go, I think. And using that and putting it together in a portfolio of work. Which leads on to, what equipment do you use? And I'll be honest with you, I am not impressed with a lot of the equipment that's out there. To give you some background, me and Nico are both in the IT business, so we deal with equipment, quality of equipment, and all that good stuff. We know how it works. So we've got a good background in being able to judge this. And anybody that's heard me talking on Seeking the Paranormal, and if you haven't, check out that podcast, because I think it's good.
It is pretty good. I like it. I listen to it.
And, things like the K2 meter is just fluff. It's not shielded. And, and it doesn't really mean anything. I don't know anybody that uses a K2 meter in a job environment. I mean, have you ever seen an electrician with a K2 meter?
No.
Why not? you know.
Set it on the computer. Viruses.
Hey, I'm sorry, your computer is infected with a demon.
Turn it off and on again.
So, you know, and things have to go off on a ghost hunt for a lot of ghost hunters to consider them good equipment. If you go like we do with a trifeld meter, which is shielded, and we know what it's measuring, it won't go off time after time after time.
And when it does, it kind of makes it more important.
Exactly.
You know?
And that is the point.
You know what I think the trick to some of that equipment is, though, is like you said earlier, when people go to these places, they do want something to happen. So people who are creating these devices know that. And if you're sitting in front of a device and it does nothing all night, you're going to feel like you got no mouth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And two, what are you getting, like you said, with the K2 meter? What are you really getting? You know, it's not an EVP, it's not any type of video.
Blinky lights.
Yeah, what are you getting? Oh, it said grandma. Yeah.
No.
Okay, what does that do?
It didn't. I mean, it'll go off. The thing is, I've watched these videos, and you'll get a snippet of the video where they'll say, if you're here, try and push this into the red zone, and it goes in the red zone. What they're not showing you is the times they sat there and said, if you're here, push it to the red zone, and bugger all
and it does nothing.
Nothing. You know, it's like, you know. And I'm going to play a clip, actually, why that's important. And bear with me. And this came from the University of Delaware, a guy called Professor Paul Brewer, who did a study on what people are more prone to believe. So let's have a listen to this.
What I wanted to do was test the impact of these kind of messages, these kind of media messages, on what Americans, what viewers, what audience members think about the topic. In the study, the participants could receive one of 4 different versions of a story about a paranormal investigator. So what we found was that reading the story about kind of the traditional supernatural approach didn't have any impact on whether people believed in paranormal investigations, being scientific or credible, or whether they believed in things like ghosts and haunted houses. It was the message, the media story, that focused on the trappings of science, you know, the jargon, the devices. When people read that story, they were more likely to believe that paranormal investigators are scientific, more likely to think they're credible, and more likely to believe in ghosts and haunted houses. So people, you know, most Americans believe in science, and so if something is presented to them as scientific, then that makes it seem more plausible, more credible.
What do you think?
I mean, I completely agree, honestly. I mean, how many people could we could influence people, just like in what we do in the world.
You're saying we could become influencers?
We could.
I've always wanted to be an influencer.
You know?
Yay, buy my nail varnish.
We could be very serious and dramatic, and I mean, you can really influence the way people think, what they see.
And the problem with that is that a lot of the people that go out investigating, it influences them in their own experiences. So they buy, once again, I'm going to use the K2 meter as my equipment of derision. You know, they're sitting there, they don't know how it works, they don't know what it's measuring, but it's scientific, it's an electronic piece of something, it's measuring something, and it goes off at an opportune time, and they'll believe it, you know, and you know, I'm not making fun of these people, it's just, that's the way, you know, that it's going, and I think that's a shame.
You know, too, I mean, some people, they don't even think about it. I mean, they believe, they've had their own experiences, and they're just trying to find a piece of equipment that, you know, they think that that's going to work for them. They buy it, they go somewhere that they think is haunted or supposed to be, and they're trying to do something. You know, they're going out on what they believe in and hoping that it works, and not even really thinking about it, you know?
Well, yeah, and that comes back to, you know, and I've dealt with enough people now, and a couple come to mind, and I'm not going to name them or anything like that, but where they have, once again, an inner truth that they are trying to externalize to, you know, hey, look, this is really real, it's not just a belief, and they'll use that as a tool to say, see, told you it was real, when really, you know, they're getting a stray radio wave or something, you know. So, you know, I find equipment like that is not helpful.
I mean, and it's tough too, because if you come along looking at it in a scientific way, or you break it down and you ruin that for them, some people get mad at you.
They do, and it's a tough call to do.
And the other tough part is not saying anything, because you know that's going to happen. You don't want to break it down for them. You don't want to ruin.
But then you're reinforcing
their bubble.
Them. Yeah. But then you're reinforcing them, or you agree with them. If they're externalizing it and making it real, I mean, then it's in the realm of you can challenge it. And to be honest with you, you're showing them respect by actually listening to them. You could just be going, yeah, not listening to them. If you actually listen to them and probe what they're talking about and you know, and challenge it, you know, at least you're listening to them, and that's a form of respect in my book.
True. That depends on the type of person you are, too. Some people will see that as respect. They want open conversation. Other people will take it as a threat.
And
oh, that guy was a jerk. I don't ever want to go on an investigation with him again.
Yeah, but oh, the investigations I can't go on. But that's because you're challenging a belief, not a fact, and that's the difference, I think. So if they come at you and say, "Look, this is blah blah blah, and it's all real," you know, and you say that's balderdash because this, and they get upset, then you know that you're challenging a belief and not something that actually happened, because, you know, if they take it personally, then it's a personal belief, I think.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's fine. We're not. The trouble is, it's hard to if you're going at it objectively and they're going at it from a subjective belief point, it's hard to know where they're coming from sometimes. Like, they really are believing it's real. You say, no, it's not real because, or if it's real, just, you know, you start challenging it, you know, which you should. I think you should. So, what do you think? Challenge them.
Agree.
There are no such thing as orbs. I'm sorry.
It's dusk.
And their colors don't mean special things, you know. That's you know, that's I don't know where they even come from. Peter Pan or something.
That's something we should do some research on later episode. Where did that come from?
Well, orbs?
Yeah. No, I mean, and the fact that different colors mean different things. I mean, who started that?
I don't know. But I know social media is making it worse, like 50 billion times worse. So
no, everything on the internet is true.
Yes, especially this podcast. So yeah, you know, and I don't know. I mean, some of the narratives, I mean, they intrigue the crap out of me where they come from, and what's the hook on them that makes people buy into them so hard that they get upset if you challenge it.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that's all some people have. Maybe that's their way of, you know, being important. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know, because I've never been there. You know what I mean?
I believed in elves.
Elves are not a bad thing to believe in.
But I just read Tolkien, so he's a bad influence on people. He got me. It was the gateway to Dungeons and Dragons, and I just got hurt. So I can't say no anymore. So, quick, give me a D20. I need some dice. Make me feel good.
Anyway.
Sorry. Tangent. Edit point.
Yeah, laugh point. Give me a D20.
So anyway, getting back to science is, you know, why it's useful in the paranormal is if you're going to have a belief or a statement of fact, put it that way, and say, no, this is really, really, really real, and I'm not fucking around, you know, and it's not a belief, so let's investigate how it works. That's what paranormal investigation really is about. Ghost hunting, I don't like the term. I mean, I do if that's what you want to do, but to say you're a paranormal investigator and then not challenge even your own beliefs, I think, is, you know, and don't call it evidence, please. don't call it evidence. It's not evidence. It's a data point at best, and you collect as many of those as you can, and try and find a pattern. And if you can find a pattern, then you can then start doing predictive experiments. Say, well, we've got a pattern, and that for us is a goal.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we're starting to do now. We're visiting multiple places, multiple times, trying to create data points so that we can go somewhere and say, usually this happens at this time.
Yeah.
For instance, I mean, the Granger house is a great one for that.
Yep.
I know we come back to that a lot, but that place is great.
It is. And to give you some background, Granger House is in Marion, Iowa, run by Adam and Sarah. They're great people. And we've been there, oh my God, 7 times, I think?
At least.
Something like that.
At least.
And the thing is, so I have a love-hate with the spirit box, and that's where I first used it. And we get words coming out of that are in context to either questions or the surroundings that we're in at the time of day. For example, if you go in the dining room at, I don't know, it's about 7, 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
and
5 and 9.
Yep, you turn that on, and you will get so many food and eating references coming out of the spirit box. It's kind of scary.
Yeah.
And we've done it again and again and again, and we get them again and again and again. So now, once again, it's not evidence. It doesn't prove that it's ghosts doing it, but it's a data point. It's a correlation of things that are shouldn't happen, or the odds are against it.
Yeah. And I would tell people who are going there, I'd say, hey, try this in between 5 and 9.
Yep.
You're probably going to get something.
Yep.
I feel very confident that they would.
And then the same thing, I mean, this is all just the spirit box one that we did, but if you go out in the coach house from about 9 to 11, you'll get a lot of weird stuff. Like we had one guy who was out there drinking whiskey.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. We were getting those kind of references coming out of the spirit box. So,
Stuff about drinking usually.
Yep, drinking.
Yeah,
so
drinking.
and that's the kind of thing that kind of trips our trigger, I guess, is getting data points, and once we get enough that we can make a pattern, we don't need the narrative behind it. We just go and do the data points, and it forms its own narrative.
Because why would you? I mean, the data points are where it's at. I mean, when we get enough and we can start actually telling people this happens in this time, go there. And it's most likely going to happen. We've had it happen 7 out of the 10 times.
Yep.
Then more than likely that's enough. I mean,
yeah.
That starts edging on proof or evidence.
Yeah. And I've watched, I've watched, we go with other groups because we're a small group and we've got a lot of equipment. So, we'll tag along with groups and do our thing, and it's great. I mean, we have fun. I mean, it's a great community. We're not knocking it. But I've seen groups that go and do all the narrative, all the history, get the tours, get told all the names of all the ghosts that appear, and then that's it. They're already primed and ready to go, and they're feeding off of that.
And that's something that is scientifically proven. I mean, I haven't really done my research on it, but I do know that if you put names and events in your head, they will come up in their own way. Especially you're somewhere at 3 a.m. in the dark.
Yep. Trying to make a word out of something coming out of the spirit box, and it sounds like a word you've heard earlier. Oh, that's what it is. So
that's what you're going to hear.
Yeah. And you're going to put it in that context. So, it's once again, it comes back to the equipment.
Or, too, if you didn't know anything, like you said, they hadn't got that narrative beforehand and what to expect, that word probably wouldn't mean much of anything to them or even come up.
No, that's right. So, now, if you want to, and I'm guessing a lot of people say, yeah, but that's important in that, if you're getting words and they are meaningful, you're not going to know they're meaningful unless you have the background. But what I would say is do a transcript of everything you got, if it's an EVP or out of the spirit box or whatever, you've got this going off in this room at a certain time. Do all of that first and then go and do the history.
Yeah, because you can get that after, and then if it fits, that's great.
Yeah. Because it's not you making it fit, it actually fits
it actually
organically
fits after the fact.
Yeah. So that's the way to, we think to do that. And we're not preaching. Well, we're kind of preaching, but
kind of. But that's the point. I mean,
it's just,
talking about it scientifically, because it is a big deal. If you go in with all that in your head, you're going to make it fit usually. Or, 9 times out of 10, if you review your evidence first and then you get that information, usually, I'm sorry, it won't fit.
Nope,
It's just a fact.
And I guess, just being objective is the thing, and if that's not your, if you don't enjoy doing that, then that's fine too, just go and have a good time. It's just, it's a pet peeve of mine when they say, oh, paranormal investigator, or, and then they go out and they got the ghost pose.
We have a ghost pose.
Yeah, we do. But we have to be naked to do it. That's not true. Or is it?
Edit point.
We're going through with this.
I can't unsee things.
We might be naked right now. You never know. It's the magic of radio. Sitting naked on a beanbag eating Cheetos. Anyway, we keep saying science, science, science. We're not really scientists, are we?
No.
I mean, we do our research and that. I mean, I guess the word really I should be using is being objective and trying to do it as best you can without the inner truth materializing to an outer truth. If you have something you believe in, test the theory, I think.
Yeah, question it.
Yeah, and test it. Find a handle on it that you can get a hold of and test. Yeah. I guess so.
And try to create something to back it up. Something that you could, argue with, honestly, or...
Well, imagine, I've found the community is pretty, it doesn't live in a vacuum. They talk online and with each other, and we go on, and we'll go to, maybe an expo or a conference or whatever. And the thing is, if you imagine that you had to talk to a skeptic, how would you put that across with any kind of depth that they could grapple with, apart from saying, well, it's my belief, because at that point it's a religion or a cult or something like that,
Something that you can't really back up, honestly.
I could say, well, I believe Beanie Babies get up and walk around at night. I've seen them. Don't laugh at me. I feel impugned now.
Yeah. Oh, I've hurt your feelings.
It's trying to imagine it in that way when you're going out there. I guess there's two types. There's people that just want to experience it, and that's cool. It's like camping, but with something to do.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna say, oh, we're going to investigate and get evidence, then really do that, because there is a downside of using science, and we're probably just as guilty. Most scientists, in fact, all scientists will probably look at us and say, "Oh, it's all pseudoscience," and bad science is going to be bad, because what you're going to do is lay something down that just gets knocked down in 2 nanoseconds by anybody that looks at something objectively and says, "Yeah, but," which is what most of it is. I mean, I'm not going to lie, but it's fun. Where it becomes compelling for me is where you get the repeats and you get a pattern, and if you start getting that, basically the paranormal is something that probably isn't true, because the odds of it being true are so high against it, because there is no evidence. Whether it's Bigfoot, we've never seen a dead Bigfoot, we've never seen a live. Oh, people have seen them, but we haven't actually had one in front of us on the news. Yeah.
On
someone
camera.
Touching it, yeah, interviewing him,
yeah, autopsy,
asking how the Hendersons really were, and we haven't had a UFO land on the lawn of the White House. So, anything like that, the odds of them, for all the people saying that they've seen them or experienced them, where is it? That's what makes it paranormal. It's weird. The chances are it's not true if you look at it objectively. But if you look for patterns or look for things that are anomalies and you keep getting them in the same place,
that's a way to evolve the field, honestly. And two, what I've never gotten is people who are seeing these things or having them happen to them, why have they never gotten anything out? I mean, residents, people who have things that have happened to them, why are they not trying to catch it on camera, on recorder?
Well, I guess some people do. But the problem with that being is then you get the orbs or the cat hairs flying around that give a streak or, and I'm sure there is some strong evidence out there, but the point about a needle in a haystack is it worth looking for it when you can go out and buy a pack of needles at Walmart? You'd spend so much time. So some of you out there listening are convinced orbs are real, and that's fine. I don't, because it's been proven that they're not real. They're dust and all that kind of stuff. And I've had arguments with people saying, well, they're not all dust. And that may be true. But the problem is the millions of orb photos out there. Are you going to look at every single one of them and find the one that's a real one?
Right.
And then how are you going to prove it's a real one?
Yeah.
It's,
Well, I mean, it's like we've talked about, too. I mean, you could have something jump right out at you, and someone is going to knock it down. You could have the best piece of what you would call evidence, and someone is going to tear it apart. Or...
That's photoshopped. I know. And that's the bad science. But not just the bad science. That's also, well, it is bad science. It's people that are taking something they believe is true that obviously isn't, but then trying to push it out into the real world and make it a reality when everybody knows it isn't, or anybody that's looking at it halfway objectively knows that's a piece of dust. Come on, and then it makes the whole field less and less and less believable.
Yeah.
And I find that's a problem, because if you want to talk to somebody objectively and say, okay, I believe that ghosts could exist. See, I always use the word could, because I don't know they exist. I'll be honest with you, I don't. I've got lots of inconsistencies and anomalies, but none of them have said I'm a ghost.
Yeah, nothing to make it stick for you.
Yeah, but I believe they are a strong possibility through what I've seen and collected. Now, if you're going to talk to someone, who's in the science, mainstream science, you could also use the same arguments against scientists. So they have been looking and looking and looking for things like a cure to the common cold. Haven't found it yet, but they keep looking.
Yeah.
And they believe in things like dark energy, dark matter. Now, it works on paper, but they haven't actually found it yet. No one's ever seen one. It hasn't landed on, same thing. We haven't had a chunk of it on the lawn of the White House and people interviewing it. Oh, are you dark matter? Yes, I am. So, where have you been? I've been around the corner.
Can't tell you.
Hanging out with dark mass. So there are parallels there that in my mind are strong. They work on paper, and I guess if we're going to do this, I mean, ufologists, they're really strong on theory, a lot of them. Some of them aren't. Some of them just have tinfoil on their head. But some of them are very strong in theory, about, how would you travel great distances? And they use Einstein's
And they
laws.
try to actually break it down to figure it out.
Yeah. And it works on paper. In fact, most scientists now actually do believe that there is life on other planets. The question isn't if there's life on other planets, is do they visit us? And then you have to play with the hows and the whys and the, which is...
Conspiracy theories also.
The government's hiding them.
Do we already know about it? Maybe.
Where do you think your phone came from?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nanotechnology. Bluetooth is actually from planet 0071.
No, it's not. It's from the Scandinavian countries.
That's what they told you.
And it's named after Harold Bluetooth. It is. He was a king.
I know.
He had a crown and everything, and a sword.
I completely believe that you were supplied with that.
I'm not sure. I was supplied with that knowledge, and I am now part of the great conspiracy of things.
It can go way as far as you can take it, honestly.
Oh, I know.
It's one little bend at a time, and before you know it,
you're out there.
Yeah, you're out there. And that's a part of bad science.
You're not only wearing tinfoil hat, you're wearing tinfoil underwear. You shall not influence my genitalia. Oh no. I know your great plan.
How did we get here?
I don't know. So anyway, to try and bring this to a close slowly, the question at the beginning was, why do we need science? And I think my opinion is we need to talk objectively over possibilities instead of externalizing internal beliefs and truths. Because if you don't have some form of data point evidence and not just anecdotes, eyewitnesses, and stories, otherwise you're just modern folktale tellers. You have to have something to back that up that is measurable, empirical, fantastical, discombobulated, all these things.
All these things. Oh, God. No, I completely agree with you. And two, I mean, it'll help further the field if people start looking at things from a different way. Instead of trying to justify their belief system.
Take crystals, for example. How do they work? A lot of people use them. I've seen lots of people use them. How do they work?
I mean, isn't the theory, some of them anyway, energy? Energy from the stone, experience from the stone, light provides energy. Isn't that kind of the main concept of it?
It is. But do you know how many people know how it's supposed to work that actually use those? Because crystals vibrate at a certain frequency. That's true. But that's all that's true that we know. Because no one that uses crystals that I know of in the field has taken the time to think, how does this work? Oh, let's test to see what frequency this crystal is vibrating at.
I think if you open yourself up to it, it kind of gets into your mind. I mean, if you're looking for, you go and purchase a stone, you're going through something in life, and you purchase a crystal that's supposed to help with, releasing energy and calming effect, which is what you're looking for. You want to believe that it's doing it.
And it works.
It does work.
Because that's the placebo effect.
Yeah, your mind does that.
Yeah. So it's not the crystal, it's your mind doing it.
But the crystal is the artifact that allows you to think that, it allows you to say, all right, this thing, this object is having that effect. It allows you to change your point of view.
Yeah.
In a way.
It is. And that's why I don't attack people's beliefs, because they're helpful to that person. They'll get them through bad times and all that kind of good stuff.
Because it is helpful. It's something that some people can't make that change themselves. Or they can't see that they need to make that change themselves. And having an object to say, okay, this object is going to do this for me, helps.
Yeah. But where I draw the line is when they externalize that and tell me, it's true for them, that's fine. But then when they use, getting back to the bad science, some kind of pseudoscience tomfoolery, or take my word for it. I mean, Einstein didn't do equals MC squared, take my word for it. It's like, show you're working. It's like going back to, show you're working. How is this working? And not only that, if you know it does a certain thing, then we must be able to test that. And here's the rub of this. There are lots of institutes and I believe some universities that have cash prizes. If I know they do it for psychics. If you can go in and you have some kind of ESP and you can prove that under laboratory conditions, they will pay you quite a lot of cash money. It's kind of like the X Prize, the Space X Prize.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, and nobody up to now has been able to do it. So if you believe in crystals and say, this will, insert effect here. So let's take that crystal and put it in those conditions and see, and not tell the person.
Yeah.
Don't say...
Because you wouldn't need to.
So if we say, okay, let's make this up. So this piece of quartz will get rid of athlete's foot. And we give it to someone with athlete's foot, but don't tell them that's what it's for. Say, hold on to this for two weeks. All right, we're doing an experiment. Hold on to it. At the end of 2 weeks, say, "Is your athlete's foot gone away?" And they'll be like, "No." "Oh, why not? You had the crystal, this person had it, and theirs went away." Because that's what they were told it would do. You know, it's things like that people don't do. And we should, I think.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, why wouldn't you? If you were, claiming to be a psychic and it's something that you could really do, okay, why couldn't you go into a scientific condition and still do it?
If I could talk to the other side, I would be asking so many questions, they'd stop talking to me anyway and it'd go away. I mean, how is this working? What are you actually made of? You know, and how do you... There's so many questions. And instead of contacting Uncle Ted to tell, his niece that I'm okay now, I'm at peace, I'd be like, fuck that. How is this working? What are you made of? Look, yeah, he's at peace. All right, now bugger off. Now, how does this work? Wouldn't you be doing that?
Yeah, I would. I would anyway.
Why aren't people doing this?
Why don't they ask more serious questions?
And
why does too? Usually it starts to fall down if they do start to ask more serious questions or get more in depth. All of a sudden, the connection is fading, but I'm feeling a connection over here now.
Yep.
And
And then once again, it's going back to the thing with orbs. That maybe they are true. I don't believe so, but and it's the same with psychics out there. That I'm not saying you're not a psychic. But what I am saying is to the general population and to objective thinking people, there are so many tricksters and fakes and people that are even famous that have been caught, using mentalists. Basically, they're mentalists. There's someone in here, does the letter M mean anything to you?
Yeah.
And I say, what in the hell is that even supposed to be? How are you being communicated? M. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's all.
So I got a really important message for my daughter. I'm going to give you M. Let's see how far we get with this.
Totally.
Come on. How is anybody objectively looking at that supposed to go, yeah, that's how that works. They get a letter. And then you give them a little bit more and they'll give you a little bit more. That's how ghosts work now. They turn into crossword puzzle gurus.
I can do that.
It's like, when you die, it just becomes a big freaking, crossword puzzle.
Yeah.
Fill in the letters, and then you'll get your message.
This is all you get. Bye.
Things like that are just, and there's a lot of them are so vague. Once again, we're not saying psychics aren't psychic.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you're a psychic, maybe you are. I don't know. That's the whole point I'm trying to bring up.
Hey,
How do we know?
Contact us.
Yeah, honestly.
Come on an investigation with us.
Exactly.
We're not knocking you.
No, and we have tried so many times to work with a psychic in not a controlled environment. We're not going to hook you up to electrodes and shock you or anything, but I mean, we want to see, even if you are getting, you're getting messages. Let's say we go to a location, you're getting messages, but how much of that is provable? And when I say controlled environment, I mean, we're going to take you somewhere, you don't know where you're going, so you can't research it.
Yeah.
And then if you start coming up with stuff, that's great. And if you really are psychic and you're psychic, honestly, that shouldn't be a problem for you to do that, I think. Because I'd be like, yeah, this.
I would love the opportunity. I mean, some of the people that we got a hold of, they never got back to us again.
No.
I mean, I've never had the opportunity to even see it happen, on an investigation. I would love that.
No, and I mean, we've watched, and we've seen, and we do our research, but, the vagueness is what kills me on that, So, once again, why do we need science in paranormal investigations? Because really, if things like crystals and psychics, we are trying to prove something with an unproven thing. And that just does not work.
I mean, to me, science kind of says, stop, think,
Yeah, just be objective.
Yeah.
It
draws the line where, okay, yes, you're way out here. Let's pull it back a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's like saying, when I was at school, and this is why I'm not really a scientist, because I hate algebra. I really do with a passion. Let X equal. No, just give me the bloody number. What's all this X rubbish? But it's like, if you're trying to prove the number 2 and you say X plus Y equals 2. Well, if you just had X equals 2, we know that X equals 2 because the only variable is the X. So we're looking for ghosts of the X. That's the variable. Now, if you say X plus Y equals 2, how the hell, there's a couple of combinations that X or Y could be, So, X could equal -2, Y could equal 4, -2 plus 4 equals 2. Or it could be a totally different combination. You are trying to prove a known with some unknowns that you just can't get, So science is kind of important. Start somewhere, you know where you're at, I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
And you start trying to prove something with something that isn't proven.
Yeah. With a data point, something that you've had happen.
Yeah. Now, you don't know what it is, but if you get enough of them, you get a pattern. You get a pattern, you can start predicting. Once you start predicting and getting the result, then you can start drawing conclusions. That's how experiments work, usually. So, now, once again, we are not attacking the community. We are just trying to bring some of it to more ground. And now we probably pissed everybody off. But we're not. I mean, what we're going to do with this podcast season, or multiple seasons, or maybe this is our last one. What we're going to try and do is we're going to talk about different things and try and, share with the community, some objectivity. And we hope you'll share things with us, because the way this format is going to work is we're going to cover, we're going to record 3 weeks, and then the 4th week we're going to go live and discuss with the community, the things we covered in the previous 3 episodes. So, and we really do want your feedback, because, as grounded as we are, we've been accused, especially me, of overthinking things and sciencing things too much and that kind of thing, which, I don't think is a bad thing, but, I don't know everything. And I have opinions, but I'm also open-minded. Otherwise, this is not what I will be doing. I'd be off, creating electronics somewhere. So what we're going to try and do in the coming episodes is we're going to, pick some subjects, and we're not going to knock them down per se. We're going to sit there and discuss, okay, if they're real, how does that work?
Yeah.
So what do you think, Nico?
I think that'd be a great idea. Us too, maybe we could get some guests on, people who want to challenge what we're saying, that'd be great.
Oh, no, not so much challenged. I mean, just discuss.
Yeah.
I don't want to be confrontational. I want to ask questions and see, what do you get for answers? And, and if we do, for example, let's say we do an episode on shadow people, we can talk about the narrative and where that's coming from. But what I want to discuss is, if they do exist, how? What's their nature? And give maybe, all of the investigators out there a handle that they can grab hold of and say, okay, let's test this.
Yeah.
Way
to educate, in a way.
Well, not just educate, but inspire, I think, because we can't educate anybody because we don't know crap any more than anybody else does.
But the collective can help, at least bringing the subject up.
I've talked to some investigators that have been doing this for a while, and some of them, when you do engage them, it kind of injects new life into what they're doing, because they end up, and that's something I'm very conscious of trying not to do, end up getting into a grind of doing the same thing, investigation after investigation, and, not attacking it from a different angle. And that's what we hope to achieve with this podcast. Whether you believe in this or not, it's like, that's all crap. That's fine. But, hopefully it'll be beneficial that you'll think of something in a way that you haven't thought of it before, and then next investigation you do say, hey, let's try this.
Yeah.
Just to see
Yeah.
if we get a result. So, yeah, and we'll be covering things like forming experiments we want to try, maybe experiments you guys want to try. And if this does take off in any meaningful way, maybe we can put out experiments that we all do and return the results from everybody and then see what we get, maybe.
I think that'd be great.
And that would be absolutely great. We appreciate you listening. And, if you don't like what we're doing, that's fine too. But if you do, tune into the next one. And we will be covering multitudes of stuff in a way maybe you haven't thought of before. Not saying you haven't, but, another angle never hurts. Alrighty, Nico, you're being very silent.
You covered it all. I think we're good.
You're saying I talk too much. You want to fight? Alrighty, so that's it from us, and thank you very much again for listening. And go away now and find a ghost and send me evidence. And you can catch up with us on phantomscience.net, which has a link to our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. Thanks again for listening.